Jay, like, you're wrong. And here's a doc that we've been working on in private that you've never seen before. And she shares that shit. And I'm like, what?
Hi, my name is Dragosh, and welcome to another episode of Toasting Failure. Today, we're going to actually have a special guest, a great friend of mine. His name is Jay, and we're going to deep dive in some of his own personal challenges and failures. Hi, Jay. How you doing?
Hey, Dragosh. Good to be on here. Let's dive into it.
Thanks so much for coming. Listen, would you mind starting by doing a brief introduction about yourself first?
Yeah, my name is Jay Wang. I'm an executive coach specializing in communication. So I help executives, fund managers tell better stories through coaching. I have a background in tech, education, and professional development. So kind of at the intersection of those three areas. And today, my story is going to be about my time in tech. One of China's top tech companies, actually.
Great, thank you. So, without further ado, what made you come on to Toasting Failure podcast? Besides me asking, obviously.
So this story is something that has kind of troubled me for a while now, and it's been a couple years since the event. So I think this is telling the story is also part of my healing process, right? As silly as that sounds, I feel like it could be cathartic.
Yeah, totally understandable. So what happened? What's the story? Who's involved? And how did that happen and evolve in general?
Yeah, so I'm going to start by talking about my experience and, just kind of a note that this is not the experience of everyone who works at this company or in Chinese tech in general. But it's solely my unique experience.
That's what we call a disclaimer.
Exactly. It's a disclaimer. So kind of rewind back to the start of COVID. This is February 2020. The business that I started doing corporate training has kind of sunk because of the pandemic, like a lot of other businesses. And so my plan B at the time was to return to tech. I'd been working as a product manager at a startup for a couple years before, and I ended up landing a job in February 2020 at one of China's hottest tech companies, Bytedance. For those of you unaware of the Chinese tech scene, it is also the parent company of TikTok. It was an exciting moment. I was super stoked. And the narrative in my mind was like, oh, this could be a platform for me to return back to the US. So I'm originally from New York, spent 13 years in Beijing, recently moved back to New York. But at the time, I was viewing this opportunity as a way for me to move with a Chinese company, kind of like an expat going the other direction. Yeah. And I was really enamored by that story. Despite a lot of my friends going, "Oh, Bytedance, Jay, heard it's long hours, super
Bytedance has
toxic culture."
Bytedance definitely has the quite a special reputation here in Beijing in general, as being people come in and out of the company quite a bit.
Yeah, a lot of turnover, but this is a younger Jay telling himself, "Hey, I can do this."
How young are we talking about?
This is 4 years ago, so
not that young.
Early 30s.
Okay.
Early 30s. I'm in my mid 30s now. So anyway, I start my job in April as a international product marketing manager, in charge of LARC, which is an in-house office collaboration tool. Really, really awesome tool. I still use it to this day. It's a fantastic tool that kind of combines Slack, Office or Google Suite and Zoom kind of all in one package. Really, really loved it. So, I think we sell products better if we believe in them. And I really believe in the product, and we were pushing internationally. So our big markets were India, Japan, Southeast Asia, US and Europe were kind of out of reach for a Chinese tech company at the time. And all was well. My first couple months on the job was learning a lot really quickly, ramped up. And then out of the blue, my boss who hired me quit the team. She was like, hey, she pulled all of us aside. She's like, hey, I'm leaving for greener pastures.
Did she give like more reason beyond that?
And she just jumped to like a more promising team. That happens a lot in Chinese tech companies where it's like, oh, you see an opportunity, you just go for it. And up to this point, my team, there was 7 or 8 of us on the product marketing team. We're all like really tight knit, got lunch and dinner all the time, just consider ourselves, we were all friends, very kumbaya. And then after her departure, she elevated myself and another colleague who I will not name, for reasons that will become more evident later on in the story. So she named the 2 of us basically like co-leads of the team. And so kind of elevated what used to be a flat, kind of hierarchy to now 2 of us were suddenly elevated. And that caused some initial rifts, I could tell. But I just kind of ignored it. I was like, hey, we're still friends. We're going to do the best job we can. And then a month later, someone else comes in as kind of like an outside hire, and he becomes like the boss of our division. So the whole marketing division falls under him. And things start changing. Some of it was external, some of it was internal. We lost India as a market because of some order clashes.
Yeah, that was like back in 2020, 2019.
Yeah, it was late 2020, I think.
Okay, yeah.
And so it's like, oh crap, we don't really have an international market anymore. Suddenly, our whole team shifts our focus inward to the Chinese market.
Yep.
And like I speak Chinese fluently, but I grew up in the States, and you could pick a random dude off the streets of Beijing who's probably going to do a better job than me marketing a product in China. It took me like hours to read docs that my colleagues would just skim in like minutes.
Yeah.
So it was a struggle from the start. The big boss was like, hey, I know this is going to be tough for you. He took me aside. He's like, hey, but I believe in you. Like, we'll do this together. And there was a little voice that was like, Jay, like, are you sure about this? Maybe not the best
that little voice, man,
choice for your career.
So
like,
hard.
That little voice.
Yeah. So hard to listen to it.
But at the time, I just wanted to rise to the challenge. I was like, fuck yeah. This guy sort of believes in me. I want to prove to him that I can do the job, even though
we can do it.
Yeah. And, basically set myself up for failure.
Yeah.
At the time we were preparing for our first ever product launch, like huge event. We were going to be in this like massive complex in 798, our district in Beijing. We were like flying every week to different offices around China and like getting different teams hyped up. I was in touch with like dozens of people across different product lines, and the work just became like overwhelming, to the point where I kind of lost track of our internal team dynamics. I knew that we were kind of growing further and further apart. We were not doing those lunches and dinners together. Little cliques started forming.
Yeah.
But at this point, I was so overtasked and overwhelmed that I just couldn't see it, you know?
Yeah.
And I needed people to be like, hey, Jay, like, you're losing your shit. Like, you're losing it.
Did you think about asking for help? Like, get your team involved to take some of those overwhelming tasks off the table?
I think I just retreated into like I'm going to do as much as I can mode. No, I did delegate. But it was too little, too late.
Yeah.
And we weren't in sync, clearly. We were kind of doing a lot of different things and just reacting to the work. And so I take a lot of personal responsibility here. Like, in no way am I saying that I was a competent actor, that I was my best self. Like, I was clearly not my best self.
Yeah.
And I probably was also contributing to the toxicity. Like, I wasn't communicating, didn't have a lot of great interactions with my teammates. And it all came to a head in December of 2020. So I was presenting something to our boss. And in this like virtual meeting, I had my screen shared with the presentation that I put together, and suddenly out of nowhere, one of my teammates is like, actually, Jay, like, you're wrong. And here's a doc that we've been working on in private that you've never seen before.
Jesus.
And she shares that shit. And I'm like, what is this? Like, I've never heard about this document. Right. And then my co-lead, right, she who shall not be named, jumps on it and was like, yeah, like, Jay does not know what he's talking about.
Oh my
God. This is what we've been working on. And I just feel the knife just like plunge in my back. Like, I feel like Julius Caesar being stabbed by Brutus in that moment. Like, I'm being very dramatic here.
Super dramatic, but like, at the same time, understandable.
Oh my God, like, you are my friend. Like, we've been to like, I've been to your house. We're like we know each other socially. Like, I'm friends with your husband. Like, I fucking, what the hell is going on here?
That is out the window.
That moment of just like devastating betrayal, I will never forget. And like, again, I take a lot of responsibility. I was not a good leader. I was not leading our team in the right direction. But I just wish they had the heart to like just confront me.
Do you think you would have had the heart to listen?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Yeah,
I think so. And the whole thing kind of blew up. My boss was like taken aback. He's like, what the hell's going on? This is chaotic, And I'd be like, hey, I'm gonna talk to my team and, we'll address this later. Sorry about this unprofessional behavior.
Absolutely unprofessional.
And we talked it through. And yeah, I mean, I was super pissed. They were super pissed.
Yeah, but like they like taking a public stance like this in front of your boss is basically going to war against you, and that's not about trying to grow as a team or try to go like, hey, can we fix this all together? It's literally trying to shun you out so they can move forward without you.
Yeah, and it kind of reflects the dominant psychology, within these companies.
Yep.
There's a concept called SIMA, horse racing.
SIMA.
And you're basically over-hiring, right? And pitting teams and people against each other. And whoever wins out, gets the fat bonus. The losers go packing, right? You get rid of them.
Yeah.
And so that sort of internal competition is always there. It's always present. And so there's a sense of like, hey, like, if you're not leading our team, then we're going to find someone else who will lead it better, and like, we're going to push you out,
Yeah.
So
I'm like, it's understandable that some of these tech companies are going through that simply because it's a great way to get people to overperform, overwork, burn themselves out. But also, it's the best way to innovate as fast as possible. But it's not sustainable. I'm like,
right. You get innovation maybe, But the downside of that is like it's horrible for morale, right?
Yeah.
Your culture is lost. Your culture is in shambles.
You're right. That's basically Bytedance just laid his bed, and basically that's what it is.
Yeah, and again, not all teams at Bytedance were like that. I've heard actually really positive stories from other friends who've had great experiences, especially in overseas offices. So that's not to say that all teams at Bytedance, had this kind of dynamic.
Yeah.
Definitely experienced probably the worst of it.
Have you heard about this culture, the Saima culture in other companies?
Yeah, I mean, definitely Alibaba comes up.
Yeah.
And Huawei's legendary for like this kind of wolf warrior mentality.
Jesus.
Right? Of like sleeping at the office, proving that you can grind yourself to the bone.
Get your butt out there. Yeah.
For a couple of years, there were, employees who dropped dead at the office because of overwork, right? And that was considered like the price of being successful. Yeah.
Let's get back to the heart of the story. So you went through this, I would say, humiliation. It's a professional humiliation in one way or another. So how did that...
Probably the most humiliating moment of my career,
So what happened right after that?
So a couple things happened. I transferred to another team within the organization at TikTok, actually, which was a lot better. I also hired several coaches to help me through this transition. The last of which inspired me to do coaching myself. So now I'm actually a coach because of her. I used to be quite skeptical about coaching, and like what do you actually do? What do you do? You ask questions, you talk to your clients, but actually, like I felt like at my lowest, this person was able to listen to me to something that I felt really shameful about. Like I didn't even want to talk to my friends about it.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't want to talk to my partner about it.
Yeah.
But she was able to talk me through it and just find new perspectives, ways for me to reframe this incident and grow from it.
What made you go towards a coach instead of actually going towards a therapist?
Yeah, so that's a good question. And that's a really interesting distinction. For me, I'm going to simplify it a little bit. Like, I think a therapist is someone who helps you heal the past. And by past, I mean like pretty far in the past, right? Like childhood stuff. Not always. It's a very simplistic definition. And a coach is someone who is, rooted in the present and helping you design your future.
Okay.
Right. And I needed someone to like get me out of this stuck mode and move me forward. And so that's why I went with coaching.
Okay. Do you think that might be a misconception?
What do you mean?
I'm pretty sure there's going to be like some voices out there that are going to come out and go like, therapists do not do that.
Sure. I mean, I said it's my definition.
Yeah.
Like, it's a very simplistic one. Yeah. But in my experience, I've gone to both therapy and coaching.
Yeah.
And based on my experience and my understanding, these are what they've helped me with.
Yeah, the differences you clearly noted between their approach.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And clearly there are therapists who can help you with one or the other, and there are coaches who can, I've been trained to be a coach. I can dive into the past with my clients if needed. I'm probably not going to touch like deep traumas.
Childhood traumas.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. And then, so you ended up getting inspired by a coach and also help you get through this.
Yeah.
Did you get through this?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was a tough journey. And I think the most important part was to take ownership. For a while I was stuck in this like, oh my God, I can't believe these people did this to me. Right. I was like a victim through and through. And once I like shook off that victim label and was like, hey, like, there was a lot that I was responsible for, right? And I was part of this culture, and I was one of the leaders of the team, and I failed to do these things, and having that ownership actually allowed me to feel better about the situation, and reflect and say like, hey, in the future, here's what I'll change. And moving into coaching, I think what this experience has helped me with was to really resonate with my clients who are going through a tough time, maybe working in a toxic team, and going through similar situations. And I'm like, hey, I've been there. Let me speak from experience. And the emotions, I can really deeply, resonate with those emotions as well. So I think it's really informed my practice as a coach.
Yeah, I'm like, I do understand that in order to understand what people are going through when they're going through professional failure or personal failure.
Yeah.
I do feel that sometimes, unless you actually live through it, and I mean really live through it, it's very hard to establish a deeper connection and all that stuff. I do believe you need to experience it a little bit beyond what's written in the books, because otherwise you're just a clinician. You're like a doctor doing a cold ass diagnosis. And I do feel most of the time when you're actually going through such a moment, you're also kind of looking for understanding, empathy, people to go like, man, you did fuck up. It was terrible. But you're not alone. It's going to be okay, and we'll support you.
And so, that support really helped, and it made me want to help others.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the most important part of that journey, was to be like, hey, I can turn this experience into something positive that I can share with other people like I'm doing today. It's been really rewarding to just, move into an area where, every time I'm talking with someone, I'm like, hey, I think I'm making an impact here.
Yeah.
My work before in tech was like, oh, I have no idea actually what I'm doing and how my work translates into impact.
Yeah.
But, the one-on-one coaching that I do, the trainings that I do, the workshops that I run, I'm like, I can see on people's faces the impact that I'm having, and that was a bigger realization for me. It's like, I need to go into a space where my full skill set is being utilized, right? Where I'm finding joy in the impact that I'm creating in the people's lives that I'm touching. And so, I think that's the silver lining, and I'm extremely grateful.
So I'm like, I want to go back to the mindset of when you decide to originally be in the project. So the first thing that comes to mind is, could you have said no into taking over that role and responsibility?
Dragosh, hindsight is 2020. And now thinking back on it, like, I probably should have said no, right? And I probably could have said no.
But could you?
But at the time, like, my boss sat me down and he's like, hey, Jay, this is very important. I didn't feel like I could say no. I really, like, saying no would have meant, like, you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah. Admitting from starters
I don't know what
that
the fuck I'm doing.
Yeah.
And you don't know what the fuck you're doing. And it's like, what are we doing here? Like, should I even be in this job? Should I quit? Like, saying no almost felt like quitting to me.
Yeah.
I didn't want to quit. Like, I liked my job up to that point. But, now looking back on it, it was like out of my hands, right? My job completely changed overnight. And that's not my fault. Like, I can't take responsibility for that. I was working a job that I didn't sign up for. And that's not my fault. But I could have said, hey, this is not the job that I signed up for. Maybe we can work something out, right?
Yeah.
In hindsight.
I'm like, the reason I'm asking this question is because I've also been in situations where, I get asked to do stuff and I feel I should be saying no. Like, sometimes you're already overwhelmed, you're already overworked, you don't have the time, or you feel it's going to you don't have enough experience or skills to be able to do it properly. And you're like, if I say yes to this, I need to do extra research. I need to train myself to be able to do it better. But every time I've been asked by any of my bosses along the years to do something, I was a little bit like you. Saying no felt downright almost impossible, because it's like admitting to saying like, oh, then why did I hire you in the first place?
Right. And I think there's an important thing to discern here, Dragos, is, what are you saying no to?
Yeah.
Right. And in some cases, maybe you're saying no to putting more effort in. And maybe that stretch is good for you, right? Good for your career, right? If you're stretching yourself 20, 25%, maybe even 50%, it's like, cool, I can do it. But I think in this case, I was saying no potentially, or I said yes to something that I was completely not equipped to deal with, right? It was not a stretch of 50%. It was like a stretch in the opposite direction by like 200%.
Oh my God.
And I was foolish, right? I was foolish, and I was in over my head. And
yeah,
that's a good lesson for all of us, for myself.
Well, I'm like, technically this whole situation is also the thing that ended up putting you on the path to become a coach in the first place.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm like,
that's true.
Again, we don't know the actual consequences of like failure until you actually go through a couple of years. And then maybe you can look back and go like,
maybe that's what needed to happen. Yeah.
That's what needed to happen.
Yeah.
So like after all these events, and so did you get over it?
It's interesting. Yeah. I'm trying to think.
Because it's a question that it's something that I talk with some people, like going through like some failures, like some of my friends, when I talk about my own failures, they go like, oh, so did you get over it? And I go like,
yes.
Sort of.
I don't cry every night anymore.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm over it. I would say like I'm 90% over it. And actually I saw my co-lead, the
she should not be named.
Yeah. At a mutual party. And, in that moment I froze. I was like, oh, like I want to avoid eye contact. I want to like just leave this room and slink back home. But then I was like, I'm going to be the bigger man and say hi and just be kind, And I asked her how she was. She was moving, out of the country. And I wished her well.
Okay.
And I'm very honest to say, like, I have no ill feelings toward any of those people. I would never work with them again. But I don't wish them badly. Like I don't hope for bad things to happen. I just hope that our paths don't have to cross that often.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does. Through some of our conversation, we talked about working in a corporate environment. Because I'm like, that's basically what working at Bytedance or TikTok is, working in a corporate environment. Yeah. And we talked about that you kind of are not really working in a corporate environment anymore. So tell me a little bit about that part.
Yeah. So I think that's maybe the remaining 10% that's still not. Because I think after that experience, and Bytedance is a very unique corporate environment. I joined in 2020. I think we had 60,000 employees around the world. When I left at the end of 2021, a year and a half later, we had 110,000. So it grew, it almost doubled.
Yeah.
Right. That sheer rate of growth and turnover, it was incredible. It was incredible, and it was sight to behold. And I'm proud of my time there. But I also left going like, I never want to work for a big corporation ever again. But I find that I work well in smaller teams that are a bit more decentralized, where we have a lot more autonomy, wear a lot of different hats, and can be like friends.
It can actually be friends with people. Yeah,
can really be like friends.
So if you would,
and I led it on a team where daddies brought their babies on camera, and we were, really like a family. So that was really special.
So let's say you become, you're slowly building yourself, like your reputation as a coach and everything. Let's say Google reaches out to you and go like, hey, we want a full-time in-house coach at our Google headquarters. You're going to work with a close team of people that are tech and smart and savvy. Would you dive into it?
Well, if Google's calling.
Google's calling.
You have to take the call, right?
So
but I'd have to see. Yeah. I'd have to see. I'm pretty happy being out of the 9-to-5 world.
Yep.
I might dive back in at some point, but I'm pretty satisfied with where I'm at right now. Yeah, I'm starting a business here in New York. A few clients already on the roster, and different projects that hopefully will generate some revenue at some point.
Yeah, it's the life of a startups in general. When you start any business venture, I'm right in the middle of it.
Yeah,
it's a tough world. It's a stressful world, but it's an exciting world too.
Very exciting.
And then you get to decide on your own schedule, and then you realize that you are terrible at having your own schedule. And then you just have to, stick to it and treat it like 9-to-5 office hours, because otherwise it doesn't work.
No, definitely. I'm finding people that co-work here. I recently roped a few friends into holding each other accountable. We have these habit trackers that we click off each day. So I'm trying to use as many tools as possible to help me keep on track, because like you said, it's hard when you're accountable to yourself.
Yeah.
Right.
If you're all alone, it's very hard.
Yeah, that's tough. And some days, I get out of bed and I'm just like, let's go on YouTube for an hour. And I'm on Instagram, and yeah, it can be tough sometimes.
Yeah. It's lonely when you start a business in general, but if you find the right people and a couple friends that help you and kick your ass towards it, then it becomes easier. You can grow with them at the same time. What would be, you would say, your key learnings from this experience overall? Let's say 3 takeaways.
I would say number 1 is, when in doubt, focus on the people. I feel like I missed the forest for the trees. I was so focused on the task at hand that I forgot to take care. That's what ultimately I think was my downfall as well. So yeah, focus on the people. You got to say no. Yeah. Right? When you need to, you got to say no. You can't.
So hard.
Because I come from the world of improv, right? I'm an improv comedian. I love going on stage and saying yes and. That's our golden rule in improv. Is you accept and you build on the other person's ideas, and you're just saying yes all the time. And I have a habit of doing that. And sometimes I need to be like, Jay, just fucking say no.
Yeah.
So being able to draw boundaries. I think number 3 is, have a clear vision for yourself. Because if you don't have a vision for yourself, then you're going to be roped into someone else's vision.
Yeah. Yeah. You basically end up self-sabotaging yourself.
Exactly. And, I didn't really have a vision for what I wanted to achieve at Bytedance, right? I just went in hey, I'll see where this takes me, right?
Hoping for the best.
I saw other friends who were very strategic about the way they moved. And, one of them was able to get a transfer to the New York office and triple the salary.
God damn it.
I'm like, wow, this motherfucker. So.
Yeah. But there's no way of actually learning about this stuff unless you actually have the mentality set for it. They don't really teach you in school about it. They don't really. You only learn from it if somebody's mentoring you, or you have to learn it the hard way when somebody does it to you, and then you go oh, this is how I should be thinking.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. I read a book recently. One of my friends recommended this to me, years too late, right? It's this book by this Asian American author, went to Harvard, is now a career coach, advises young students and young professionals about how things really work. in the workplace.
Yeah.
Right. And he's a child of immigrants. Like he's like, hey, I didn't know about these things. My friends who are white, because this is America, right? My friends who are white heard about this, at the dinner table from their parents and from their mentors, etc. It's called The Unspoken Rules by Gorik Ng.
Okay.
And a lot of great, useful advice. Obviously, still not as probably impactful as like personally experiencing it, but like you could do much worse than reading that book. I highly recommend it. Unspoken Rules.
Thank you, Jay, for today. Thank you for the great conversation and sharing the story with us. Very enlightening. Do you have a message for the world out there?
I will say that, life is short, and like find your joy. I think we tend to really focus and zoom in on the details, and a lot of times get caught up in the day-to-day that we forget to like really enjoy living.
Awesome.
It sounds kind of hippy dippy, but I'm gonna leave it there.
That's fine. All right. Thank you so much for being part of today's Toasting Failure episode. My name is Dragos, and thank you, Jay, for being with us today. Who knows? Maybe you're going to show up again in future episodes. I'm sure you have more than one story to share.
Happy to come back.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you, Dragos.
Have a great day. Thank you for listening to this latest episode of the Toasting Failure podcast. If you liked it, be sure to subscribe and follow. And for more episodes, we'll be back every Thursday.